Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we're talking about Stephen Breyer, the Supreme Court judge, sort of announced his retirement. I think everybody kind of announced it for him. The White House, very happy about this. You can see on the thumbnail that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden probably doing cartwheels over there if they could, because this is going to be something very useful for them to change the narrative away from all of the catastrophic problems that this White House has been unfolding for the last year or so. And so we're going to break it all down. We're going to do a recap. Who is Judge Stephen Breyer? Who is this guy? Where did he come from? I've got a very interesting clip from Stephen Breyer and Bill Clinton jogging around Washington, D.C., I think making inappropriate jokes with each other as they are getting some exercise. So we're going to recap on who Stephen Breyer is. He's been on the Supreme Court for a long time. It's going to be a big change in terms of personnel, but is it a big change in terms of the Supreme Court? Probably not, but we'll see why this is happening right now. It sort of seems like it's kind of early in the year. They're just getting started with their Supreme Court term. We know that it doesn't end until October. So why is this all coming out now? We're going to speculate and break it down. Of course, as soon as this stuff leaks, everybody jumps into the game of who is going to be the nominee. And so that is in full course already. Jen Psaki was taking some questions today from some people in the press who were asking her a very pertinent question. Who is the nominee going to be? Could it even be Kamala Harris? Jen Psaki didn't disclaim it. You know, you'd kind of want like a big unequivocal no. She's like, well, we're not going to talk about that today. And so everybody's going, what? What does that mean? So Ducey over from Fox and other people around the interwebs are sort of keying in on what the next prospective nominee will be, who it will be. We don't know yet. So we're going to play that game a little bit. And we are going to take a look at some of the prospective nominees. There's a woman I learned a lot more about today, former public defender, actually. Have a clip from her. Her name is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and I actually like what she had to say. She's a former public defender. She's on team defense, and so we'll break down all of that and more. We'll see exactly what's going on as the show unfolds. But before we do, we have to say, if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. They are chatting away, and I can see them over there. We've got TOS for Eva, Suga Britches is in the house, Vienticus Prime, Thunder 7. We've got Chairman of the Boards in the house, along with Radice, Tweak, all having a good time chatting over there. And so we are taking super chats over on YouTube. We are not going to be using the form today. We're not using the form for questions over on Locals. So we are just going to be taking questions from the chat. Form is not in effect today, so we'll not be using that. But without any further ado, we can go ahead and get into the program. Instructions for sending me a comment on Locals are over on Locals. So if you'd like to do that, go check that out there. All right. So here is the show. Let's get right into it. Judge Stephen Breyer, United States Supreme Court, sort of announced his retirement. I mean, he's going to be retiring, but I don't think that he wanted it to be known today. But somehow it leaked today, and so we're going to have to break that down and determine where did it come from and why did it come out today of all the days. But who is Stephen Breyer? You know, I know that I'm sort of a legal geek. I know that some of you out there probably consider yourselves in that same category, respectfully. But, you know, there are a lot of people out here who just kind of, have a difficult time keeping tabs on all the 9 judges as they exist out there. And so let's take a look about who we're talking about. We can see that we've got Judge Breyer. He's right down here. This fella, he is somebody who's been on the court for a long period of time. He makes up the left wing of the court. He is joined by Judge Kagan and Judge Sotomayor to make up the left wing. And so now you can see if there's 3 lefty-ish judges, and many people might say that Judge Roberts is sort of a pseudo-lefty, then if you swap this leftist out with another leftist, does it change the balance of power of the court? No, not really. But it does sort of, set a tone for the next several decades. These judges will stay on here for sometimes 40, 50 years. And so, you put a person in there yes, because of what they're going to, sort of what their current political posture is. But we've also seen historically, that judges, they don't really stay the same. They're just like a normal human person, because many of them are actually humans. And as a person matures and as they learn things, we see philosophies shift. Oftentimes, it's not in the direction that I appreciate, candidly. We see guys like John Roberts, who are supposed to be these stalwart conservative people, and then they just start, drifting leftward. So we're studying exactly what's going on here, because many of these people, they're not in office for 4 years. We're talking about 40 years. We're talking about their entire lives. And so a little bit more about this guy as he exits. Stephen Gerald Breyer, American lawyer, served as the Associate Justice, went to Stanford, and then went to Harvard. And we're going to see this. We're going to go through and just do sort of a recap on where all the Supreme Court judges come from, because it's pretty hysterical. Basically, it's all Harvard and Yale. Too long, didn't watch. That's the answer. Here you can see he was nominated by Bill Clinton, assumed office back in 1994. And so he's been in there for quite some time. 94, 2004, 2014, 2022, long time. And so now he's going to be exiting. And of course, the big question is why now, right? Not entirely that old. Let's see how old he is. Born 19, he's getting up there. In his book, Active Liberty, let's see, American news outlets reported he intended to retire from the Supreme Court at the end of the term. Official announcement may come as soon as January 28th, according to Wikipedia. So this is the judge, right? Been there for a long time, on his way out. Here was an interesting clip as I was sort of going back and trying to revisit some of Breyer's greater hits. This is Stephen Breyer right here. You can see he's running around, I believe it's D.C., This is Bill Clinton, who is jogging here. We've got Secret Service agents all over the place. I don't think that's Monica Lewinsky, but it is a female. Not sure who that is. But you can see it's going to be Bill Clinton and the judge running around, just getting some exercise. And somebody's going to ask him a question. They're going to say, oh, hey, Mr. President, who's faster? Is it the executive branch or is it the legislative branch? And listen to what Bill Clinton has to say. Here, this is from, I think, 1994.
Some sort of edge, right? Is he going to cut around, you think?
I would say, maybe it's the other sidewalk.
Who's faster, the judiciary or the executive?
No, he's much faster. Much faster. The judiciary lasts longer, that's
Oh, Bill Clinton. Did you hear what he said? Did you hear that? So they're running down the street. I know it was loud and a little bit muffled, but the reporter says, Mr. President, who's faster, the executive or the judiciary? And Stephen Breyer, the judge, says, oh, the executive is. They're much faster. Because that's kind of a good political joke. Right? The judiciary is kind of slow and they think, and it's a political joke. The executive's kind of fast. They move things, right? It's an executive decision. We made a decision, go. So Justice Breyer is giving us a little bit of a political joke. And then Bill Clinton, a pervert, he comes out and he says, yeah, but the judiciary lasts longer. And everybody goes, oh, you gross Bill, what's wrong with you? We're trying to have a mature adult conversation here, all right? And you just take it right into the gutter. Typical. Although it's pretty dang hilarious and pretty clever. And you can see why Bill Clinton, why so many people liked him, because it's funny as hell. All right, so the story goes that Breyer's not real happy about this, all of this information being leaked out. And it says, by the book, Breyer. By the book, Breyer said to be miffed at retirement being leaked, unhappy about it. And says, so Associated Supreme Court Justice Breyer reportedly miffed that his retirement was leaked, a violation of his practice of following the protocol by the book. Sources said at the beginning of the standard process of scaling back, say that he was starting the process of scaling back. They were going to say he was going to announce at the end of the term that he was done in several months. Insiders saying, no, he's a by-the-book guy. He likes to follow protocol. Did not plan for this to leak out. He was just getting started. And so fingers now start getting pointed. They say that the White House may have been the people that were actually leaking this stuff, desperate to change the news, coverage from the president's bad polls and his policy failures, and so on. And so, of course, I spend some time on Twitter when I'm doing my show prep, and I take actually much more than that, unfortunately. But you can see here that there was this sort of a conversation taking place all day today after this broke out. Susan Crabtree, I think she's over at Real Clear Politics. She posted a couple very interesting things on Twitter today and said, Breyer is upset about the way this leaked out. Sources close to SCOTUS tell me. Usually, SCOTUS justices are allowed to announce their retirement on their own terms, as has occurred in the last 3 retirements. And she gives us a thread down here below. Says this is very early in the year, very early in the term, and historically, we take a look at the other sort of traditions here. Says Breyer retirement leak is pretty ugly considering aggressive calls from the left for him to retire. And I've got clips of this. I mean, this has been the drum that they've been beating for a long time, that he needed to go because if anything happens, I mean, think about this. Let's flesh out just how precarious the situation is. What happens, let's say, for example, that, in a Senate balance of power that's, 50-50 with Kamala as the tiebreaker, what happens if like one of those Democratic senators who's in a red state, like what happens if they get COVID and unfortunately are no longer with us? And a Republican governor gets to reappoint a senator to that position and the balance of power of the Senate changes, right? Something like that happens. Well, suddenly what happens now is they don't get to confirm whoever they want, and we have a lot more leverage from the other side of the political aisle. And so people have been screaming from the rooftops, get this done now, because the last thing they want to have happen is exactly what happened with Amy Coney Barrett. Remember, they were doing the same thing with Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, saying for a long time that she had to go quickly. She didn't. Guess what happened? Amy Coney Barrett replaced her. And they don't want this to happen again. What happens if, let's say, Breyer doesn't retire and the balance of power in the Senate changes maybe in November? And they don't get to confirm whoever they want anymore. And we get a lot more of a moderate person in there, which might be great for America, but not so good for the left. So that is what I think is creating a lot of this urgency to get him out of there. And we've been paying attention to this, right? A guy who's been serving for 40 years or 30 something years is now sort of being shown the door. Doesn't feel too good. Susan Crabtree is noticing this. Says that Justice Souter announced retirement in May. Okay, and so the Supreme Court term, it goes from October to October, full year. And so you can see that they'll come out, announce it in May, spend the summer months wrapping up their affairs on the term, and then exit out in October. Justice Stevens announced in April, same type of standard, and Justice O'Connor back in July. Now we know that, like Scalia passed away. And so she's going back and making a connection that, this is something that traditionally is announced much further on down the line. Now, Susan Crabtree says, asked if POTUS Biden has talked to Breyer today. Press Secretary Terse says, I don't have any more details of their communications. Actually, she had no details of any conversations they've had today or otherwise. Okay, so didn't answer any questions over there. And it's not just Susan Crabtree who's reporting this. Shannon Beam is reporting this as well. Says multiple sources tell me Justice Breyer was not planning to announce his retirement today. They describe him as, quote, upset with how this has played out. We will still await any official notice from his office and or the SCOTUS Public Information Office. Okay, so it's not even been officially revealed yet. The judge has not announced it. The SCOTUS office doesn't have a formal statement. So everybody's chomping at the bit here on one particular side of the aisle. Shannon Beam says, okay, a little bit more clarity. I'm told Justice Breyer had firmly decided on his own to retire and that an announcement was due very soon. And while it appears someone jumped the gun on that, better to characterize him as, quote, surprised by the events rather than upset. All right. So now Justice Breyer is having to walk back his disappointment. So somebody basically leaks this out. He's upset about this. Now they say, oh, now they see that you're upset about this. We've got discord, disharmony between the teams. So they walk that back now a little bit. Now, as I said, this has been something that has been a very, very strong effort from the Democrats for a long time. Here is a Democratic representative, Mondaire Jones. He posted this back in June 2021. So, almost half a year ago, says, voters believe that Breyer should step down, lest his replacement erase his legacy. Remember this language? Very aggressive. And you're thinking, guys, like, this is somebody on your team. He's going to have to make decisions for you on issues that you care about. And so people were speculating that a lot of this language might be not so useful for the people that needed Justice Breyer to side with them. Now, he's reliably liberal, so I don't know that there was any real threat there. But here is what one Democratic representative wrote. He said, this weekend, Mitch McConnell told us what we should have already known. If Republicans retake the Senate, they're going to block Biden from filling the Supreme Court, just like they did when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Under the shadow of this latest threat of obstruction, it's never been more urgent for the 82-year-old Stephen Breyer to retire before it's too late. New polling shows that his 27 years has been good, but 6 in 10 Americans want him out of there. And so he has if you go to his webpage, you can see there's a whole just section on this number of different polls. Hey, Ruth almost ruined this basically country for us because she was replaced by Amy Coney Barrett. Don't let that happen again. And this narrative was, all over the place. In fact, they even built a truck that they drove around saying, Breyer, retire. It's time for a black woman Supreme Court justice. There's no time to waste. And they even have a whole website about this, demandjustice.org, which I think that's Data for Progress. But you can see, right, it was a full-on assault, and they got their wish. So this has all been accomplished. They're very happy about it. And so we're going to see how the nomination process unfolds. But before we do, why might they have leaked this out early? It's kind of unbecoming of anybody to do that to somebody else, right? To sort of take out their departure announcement from under them when they weren't in alignment. And so people are speculating about why this may be. All a Pundit, who's a great blogger over at hotair.com, writes this. Responding to Shannon Beam, who says, multiple sources tell me Breyer was not planning to announce it today, and he's upset. All a Pundit says, I'm going to guess that he gave the White House a heads up privately as a courtesy, and they couldn't resist leaking it to give their deeply demoralized base something to get excited about, which I think hits it right on the head. We have been saying for a long time that this sort of feels like what Ukraine-Russia situation feels like. Oh, everything here domestically is a mess? Well, we better get involved in a global war. This is very also convenient because now they can talk about making history and they can talk about waging against the Republicans who are obstructionists, right? It's a new cause. It's not really going to change much on the court, probably in terms of voting, but we'll see how it goes. Now, why would they leak this early? Well, All a Pundit writes for us. No confidence. Biden's numbers turn negative on every major poll issue in a new Pew poll. And the thing that's interesting about this is not just that his polls are in the garbage, but it's that it's the Democrats who are abandoning him. Alla writes, the point to bear in mind about declining confidence in Biden is that it's not Republicans who are driving it. Righties had little confidence in him to begin with. There's only so much support he can shred from a cohort of supporters that's already small. It's Democrats who began with great expectations and have since found themselves disappointed about, everything, he writes. And here you can see it, right? The numbers are just going into the can, which is wild because they're not going to be changing any positions and they're kind of doubling down on everything, I guess. John Gramlich has given us a report, says large majorities in both political parties, 77% or more, say prices for food, consumer goods, gasoline are worse today than a year ago. Here's the numbers. Percent who say compared to a year ago, each of the following is worse. Consumer goods, in total, 89. Gasoline prices, even 78% of the Democrats, lean Dem or Dems, are upset about it. Cost of housing, available consumer goods, basically everything up until healthcare. The Dems are pretty okay with healthcare, 49%. Like, it's all right. Only 49% of them say it's worse. The other 51% are okay about it. And basically nobody's upset about the job situation. Plenty of jobs. You can just see it's across all parties. It's Democrats, it's independents, it's Republicans. You can see it. Impact on handling the Democrats, the outbreak. Even that, right? This one arguably may have been the thing that won literally Joe Biden the election. The pandemic, the coronavirus, right? That's all it was. I'm going to shut down the virus. Anybody who allows this many deaths to happen is not somebody who should be president. All that type of language. And to take that number from a 92% down to a 69, woo, boy, that's a tough one. And so every other policy issue you can see is along the same trajectory. We've got make good decisions about economic policy going down, make wise decisions about immigration policy, even Democrats, that's 85 to 66. Bring the country closer together. Look at that cratering. 74 down to 47. Criminal justice issues from 80 down to 64, and dealing with China, 83 down to 65. So not looking good. Democrats agree Biden should listen equally to the party's conservatives and moderates. Okay, stop being so lefty. But we know that Jen said that that's not the case, that her take on all of this is that Biden's agenda appeals to a broad swath of progressives. Not good. Not too good for the Democratic Party. Pretty good for America because it looks like there's going to be a bloodbath. All a Pundit writes, a scary fact for the Democrats. His approval rating today is almost exactly what Trump's was on this date 4 years ago when the then president registered a 40.1 over a 55 in the Real Clear Politics average, which is basically about where we're at right now. Right? 40.1 for Trump, and here it's 40.8 for Biden, and it's probably going down. Trump gained a modest amount of ground throughout 2018, eventually got up to 43.9%. But that was low enough for the Democrats to wallop the Republicans in the House races back then. Biden's job approval is meaningfully lower right now than Trump's was that November. So does that frame out why this decision is rushed so badly? Because it's going to be a bloodbath in November. It's going to be a red wave. They know it. Breyer knows it. Everybody can read the polls just like the rest of us can. And they know that there's a real clear chance that they don't actually hold on to the Senate, in which case the entire confirmation process now is off the rails for the Democratic Party. We can see that other people are confirming this. Guy Benson, once again, saying, yeah, calling Breyer upset may have been overstating it, but just saying that the final announcement was planned on coming soon. Sean Spicer says the White House leaking Breyer's retirement as a distraction was a pretty low blow for a guy who's been a loyal soldier and was doing them a solid by retiring while they still have the Senate majority. And Tom Fitton from Justice Watch asks a good question. I can't imagine why Senate Republicans would agree to move on the replacement for Breyer until after the November elections. So you can see people are already speculating about what the Republicans are going to do and how this entire nomination process will unfold. Let's see now what the White House thinks about this sudden announcement. Now, there's stories that they knew about this even before today, which I imagine they would. But Joe Biden gets asked about it today. He's not ready to talk about it, of course, because he's not ready to talk about much. But here's how that sounded when he was meeting with some people.
Justice Breyer, Mr. President, Justice Breyer is going to retire.
Let's go. Thank you. Let's
go.
Thank you.
Your thoughts on Justice Breyer's retirement, sir?
Thank you. Let's go. Thank you, guys. Let's go. Thank you.
We're not. Guys, we're continue with the meeting, please. Thanks so much.
Every justice has the right and opportunity to decide what he or she is going to do and announce it on their own. There has been no announcement from Justice Breyer. Let him make, and I'll be happy to talk about it later. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, so we're going to...
I'll be happy to talk about this later. I'm going to get into this issue, okay?
Thank
you so much.
We're going to start by asking Tom Linebarger to offer your thoughts, please, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be
You want to go to the
here.
Supreme Court, Tom?
You want to go to the Supreme Court, Tom?
I'm just going to demur on that one.
He says, I'm just going to demur on that one. You want to go to the Supreme Court, Tom? I'm just going to demur on that one. So Not too much out of the president there, rightfully so. They have to show their respect to the process, even though they probably leaked all of this out. It still is something they have to, go through the formal process. And so it's a little bit of an interesting thing that's happening because you can't confirm that they leaked it, but it would certainly serve their interests if they leaked it. Biden gets asked about it, and you can see he's kind of really struggling to eke out even a sentence there. And there were a couple other very interesting clips that the Republicans clipped out, and we're going to go through them just because they do stand out a little bit. Joe Biden now puts his mask back on, so you can see he had his mask off, and now his mask is on, and he's just got some weird things that are being sort of muttered into the microphone. And so there's a YouTube channel called, I think it's called GOP War Room or something like that. Not the Steve Bannon podcast, but they clipped all of these. And so, bear in mind that these are not, we're not watching the entire thing, but I don't know what sort of context you could wrap around it that would make it seem okay. Anyway, here's Joe Biden.
Okay, I'm looking for a job, Mary.
Okay, so, I'm looking for a job, Mary. And then here's this one.
But I might point out, when I went to Dearborn, driving that, was up there. I don't know, man. I think the press thought I was crazy. I enjoyed it so much going up and your new EV factory and that Hummer.
Okay. So you're kind of struggling there. And then what's this one?
I'm just going to demur on that one, but it's really an honor to be here. Thank you for.
Oh, that was a Supreme Court question. So some of those clips are, interesting. I'm not real sure kind of what's going on with the masks on and off. He's kind of mumbling his way through some of the press conference there. Don't know what exactly is going on there. China's a little bit, concerned about this, as are the rest of us. Anyways, Jen Psaki came out and said, listen, look, it's always been the decision of any Supreme Court justice if and when they decide to retire. So just leave us alone. Says, and how they want to announce it. Okay? So even though we probably leaked this, still their decision. And that remains the case today. We have no additional details or information to share from the White House. Now, that was at 10:04 a.m. Of course, Jen Psaki came out and gave a press conference. And so we're going to check in with Jen because the press has a lot of questions about this. Of course, Breyer's retiring. Who's going to be the next judge? We've got a whole number of different highly credentialed individuals ready, chomping at the bit to get on that bench. They want to be on there, and they've been fighting their whole lives to be on there. And so people want to know who it's going to be because it impacts a lot of people's lives. And if you rewind the clock, Joe Biden has already given us a hint. He's already told us who he intends to nominate for a position like this. If you do rewind the clock, I think this was in 2019 or 2020, not real sure when it was exactly. Back during the Democratic presidential debate, so probably was, I'm not sure when it was, the primaries. Here's Joe Biden telling us about what he intends to do with the Supreme Court if he is elected, and he was.
We talked about the Supreme Court. I'm looking forward to making sure there's a black woman on the Supreme Court to make sure we, in fact, get every representation. Not a joke. Not a joke. I pushed very hard for that.
All right. So you saw what he said, and he's going to be standing by it. So he gets asked about that today at the press conference, right? So he's identified that for us, and Jen Psaki gets asked about it. Now, again, Jen Psaki already posted on Twitter and said, I can't talk about this because Breyer hasn't even announced it yet. I have no idea how this got leaked or why this would be, communicated now rather than in April or May or June or July. But it's out there. And so, I mean, if you're going to ask questions about it, I'm going to have to officially demur away from them. But here, she might be willing to play the speculation game. Here's what that sounds like.
Let me say one other thing. I know there is a lot of news out there today, so let me reiterate something that you heard the president say, and I also said over Twitter. It's always been the decision of any Supreme Court justice, if and when they decide to retire, how they want to announce it, and that remains the case today. So we are not going to have additional details. You are always welcome to ask any questions you like at any time, and there's a lot of news out there, but I just wanted to say that at the top. Josh, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Two subjects. So let's say hypothetically, a Supreme Court justice was to retire and announce it on his or her own terms. Does President Biden plan to honor his pledge to nominate a black woman to the court?
Well, I've commented on this previously. The president has stated and reiterated his commitment to nominating a black woman to the Supreme Court, and certainly stands by that.
Okay.
For today, again, I'm just not going to be able to say anything about any specifics until, of course, Justice Breyer makes any announcement, should he decide to make an announcement.
Okay, so there you go. So Joe Biden said it back during the campaign. There's been a big media push from the Democratic Party. We just read one of the statements from the prior representative, right? A lot of people sort of urging this to happen. It gives Biden the moment to come and fulfill a campaign promise. And so Jen Psaki is, she can't really officially confirm it because there hasn't been an official retirement announcement yet, but she's basically confirming it. Which leads a lot of people to start, sort of wrap their heads around, the potential universe of candidates. Okay, well, we now know Joe Biden originally confirmed he was going to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court. Jen Psaki confirming that. Many people start to look around the White House and they say, I know of a black woman, Kamala Harris. Could she be the new Supreme Court nominee? It's not a crazy thought. Press is asking.
Mayor Ginsburg, none of that you can share?
I'm not going to detail internal planning from here, no.
Okay, then let me ask you a couple other questions. Is there any scenario in which the president would select his Vice President Kamala Harris for the Supreme Court?
Again, I'm not going to speak to any considerations, preparations, lists, and as we've stated earlier, and you heard the president say, there's a long history of Supreme Court justices determining when they may retire, if they retire, and announcing that. And we're going to, that remains the case today.
Clearly you are more wiser than to take those questions then. So I will ask you about a different topic, and that's Vladimir Putin, the president.
All right, so she, a lot of people are listening to that answer, and they're like, yeah, but you didn't say no. Okay, I know that you don't want to answer questions about this situation, but you didn't say no. And on a question like that, you kind of expect a big resounding no, don't you? You kind of expect people to just say, oh, gosh, no. Kamala Harris, no, she's happy to be the vice president. Joe Biden put her on the border. She's doing a great job down there stopping all of the illegal immigration. And so there's no way in shape, that doesn't make any sense at all, Ducey or whatever that guy's name was. Ducey's
Talked
next.
about it.
Here's Ducey.
Talked about is in an initial package.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. When you were asked about the vice president possibly being selected as a Supreme Court nominee, you said you're not going to speak to any considerations. Does that mean she is being considered?
Again, Peter, I'm not going to speak to the reports of a Supreme Court justice retirement that hasn't been announced.
So theoretically, would someone who's...
Theoretically, I do like that you preface it. I appreciate that.
Just wondering, hypothetically, theoretically, would someone who was an attorney general of a large state and who served with many key Senate votes be an attractive candidate to the president for an open Supreme Court seat?
Hypothetically.
I see what you did there, Peter. But the president has every intention, as he said before, of running for re-election, and for running for re-election with Vice President Harris on the ticket as his partner. But again, I will just reiterate that I have nothing more to offer in terms of specifics or information on the reports this morning.
Not enough.
Would you have another question for
yes.
me? Go
It's
ahead.
not a
I know
no.
there's other things.
He's great. He's like, so that's not a no. And you have another question, she says, which is just hysterical. I mean, first of all, I would absolutely love it if they nominated Kamala Harris. It'd be hysterical to just watch this whole thing, this train wreck slowly unravel in front of us. But I don't think it's going to happen. Fox News is playing around with this as well. A lot of people on the interwebs are having some fun with this idea. As we're going to see, we've got Breitbart is also messing around with the idea. Joe Pollack over there. He's also on Locals, by the way. Here's what Fox News had to say about some of this afternoon. Could it really be Kamala Harris? I mean, she's kind of not really effective as a vice president. People are noticing this. Her poll numbers are dropping. They're worse than Biden's. People are exiting and entering her administration, her whatever she has going on there. It's not working out real well. would this be useful for the White House to sort of just kind of, put her on the Supreme Court so they don't have to deal with her anymore?
Interesting. So this person has to be a woman, she has to be black, and she's got to be younger. Anybody thinking what I'm thinking? They don't know what to do with Kamala Harris in the White House right now. I can't be the only person seeing this. And you have read, I'm sure you have, Kaylee, because you and I have chatted about it. We've been reading that maybe something like this could happen with the vice president. He runs again at someone else. Look, I prefer to drink my tea rather than read the tea leaves. But when Jonathan Turley, puts out the information of young black and female, it's hard not to see at least she makes the list. Kaylee?
I think you're right. I'm glad you said that, Harris, because that was playing in my mind from the moment we heard about this retirement. It is, politically speaking, if you are not happy with your vice president and you want her in a different role, there's no greater role than on the Supreme Court. It's a role that anyone would be honored to have. Again, I would just note there's no reporting to this end at the moment, so this is just speculation. But it's widely known, there is a ton of reporting, Harris, as we've covered here on the show, that people are not quite happy with Kamala Harris, both in the West Wing, outside of the West Wing, Democrat operatives. So it's a possibility. I think she's at least on the short list, and maybe it's a position she'd readily want to consider or accept, given the challenges of the vice presidency, given the frustration she's incurred. I think it's a theory that could be credible.
Or at the very least, it's an opportunity for her to stand up and own the job that she has, that we may find out that she actually relishes and would love to be able to do.
So they're just dunking on Kamala over there. But I'm not so sure about that. She's I'm not sure that she's quite the addition that she probably thinks she would be, but we'll see. But a lot of people on the Twitter webs are having some fun with this. So, for example, here's one from Dylan Matthews. He's a blue check mark. He says, it's pretty straightforward from here. Number 1, nominate Kamala to the Supreme Court. Number 2, nominate Pete to be the vice president. Number 3, Biden resigns early. Number 4, President Pete. Oh, gosh. Somebody just vomit. All right, and let's see what Joel Pollack is saying over here. Says Hillary for president 2022. Here's the strategy. Number 1, elect Biden by any means necessary. Number 2, make sure the media sours on Kamala Harris. Number 3, kick Kamala upstairs to SCOTUS. Number 4, for Hillary, get appointed to the VP slot. And then number 5, wait and then act. Joel Pollack says, if I disappear, you know why. And he actually wrote an article over at Breitbart News, how Kamala Harris could be the first black female Supreme Court justice. Oh, could you imagine? Could you imagine you wake up one morning and it's 2022 and it's President Hillary Clinton? Where did that happen? Where'd that come from? Sounds like a nightmare. All right, so let's get some background on the current Supreme Court judges. And you can see there's kind of a pattern here. And so, you can follow patterns and you can sort of predict what might be coming next. But let's see where some of these judges went to school. It's kind of pretty consistent, not even that interesting. We can go to Judge Samuel Alito. Where'd he go? He's got his JD from Yale. During his time at Yale, went to Yale. Got that. Judge Breyer. Oh, he went to Harvard, so he's on his way out. Judge Gorsuch also went to Harvard, got a Harry S. Truman scholarship. Brett Kavanaugh, where'd he go? Well, he went to Yale, of course. Elena Kagan, she went over to Harvard. John Roberts went to Harvard. Sonia Sotomayor went to Yale, and Clarence Thomas went to Yale. So basically, only one of these things is not like the others, and that's Judge Amy Coney Barrett, which went to Notre Dame. So obviously, she's like that weird kid in school. And she probably doesn't get invited to the cocktail parties because she didn't go to the other Ivy Leagues. And so, you can see that there's sort of a narrow pool of people that the establishment likes to draw from anytime they pick people to, do these types of things. And we have some pretty interesting candidates to talk about. The first biggest name that you're probably going to hear a lot about, I think what many people think is the front runner, is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And folks, I got to be honest, I like what I'm hearing in this clip. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson discusses her prior experience serving as a public defender in D.C. Very curious. We're going to listen to that clip in a minute, but let's learn a little bit about her from the New York Times. She's one of the candidates who is sort of in the lead. She's the leading candidate, they say, to succeed Justice Breyer. So she's already in the Court of Appeals. It was approved by the Senate last year, 53-44. So she's been in front of the Senate. She's 51 years old. Already went through last year when she was being confirmed to the D.C. Circuit. All 50 members of the Democratic caucus voted for her, as did 3 Republican senators: Susan Collins of Maine, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who votes for all of Biden's appointees, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. And so these 2 ladies, women, are basically, Democrats, sort of with Republican labels, but they're definitely not, hardline Republicans in any sense of the word. Judge Jackson also, this is an interesting thing, also clerked for Judge Breyer during the Supreme Court's prior term. And guess where she went to school, folks? There it is. Harvard Law School. Oh, and so you've got a couple things that just make her kind of a shoo-in. She's already been confirmed. She's in the D.C. Circuit. D.C. Circuit is sort of the training ground for the Supreme Court. So she's at the D.C. Circuit, clerked for Judge Breyer. I think Gorsuch clerked for Anthony Kennedy. And so it's sort of like, handing the reins down to the next person. And so I think she's probably a very strong front runner, far and away from some of the others. She clerked for Judge Breyer, worked at Harvard, worked for several legal jobs, including a staff member for the Sentencing Commission. Federal public defender Barack Obama nominated her. Handled a number of challenges to executive agencies. And this is the cream of the crop, folks. This is why she is perfect for the Democrats, all right? Among them, in 2019, she ruled that Donald McGahn, too, the former White House counsel to Donald Trump, had to obey a congressional subpoena seeking his testimony over Trump. All right, this all goes back to the Russian investigation. Oh, don't you like how all these tentacles lead back to the Russian investigation? Isn't it interesting? And so you can see how she's perfect, right? Like perfectly primed for this position. Now, she's a Democrat, but I like what she says here in this clip, and I'm not being facetious about this at all. What she says here is exactly right. And if we had more judges and more people in our criminal justice system that thought like this genuinely, that'd be good for our country. Here is what she says.
I had the privilege of serving as a federal public defender, assistant federal public defender in Washington, D.C., I think it was some 16 years ago. And as part of that experience, I, as you say, represented people. I represented them in the appellate division of my office. So all of my clients were convicted. And I think that the insights that one gains from that kind of professional experience really can be very helpful in future endeavors, especially if you go into the judicial service, as I have. And I can give you a concrete example. When I worked with my clients as a defender, my job was to talk with them and to try to get their help to identify errors, things that had gone wrong in their trial proceedings, so that I could raise them on appeal. And one of the things that I noticed that I was really struck by was how little they could help me with that project. Most of my clients didn't really understand what had happened to them. They'd just been through the most consequential proceeding in their lives, and no one really explained to them what they were supposed to expect, so they didn't know where things might have gone wrong. And I remember that experience from all those years ago when I became a trial judge. One of the things that I do now is I take extra care to communicate with the defendants who come before me in the courtroom. I speak to them directly and not just to their lawyers. I use their names. I explain every stage of the proceeding because I want them to know what's going on. And when I have to sentence someone, and I've sentenced more than 100 people to date, I always tell them, I explained to them, this is why your behavior was so harmful to society that Congress thought that it had to be made a crime. And I say that this is why I, as the judge, believe that you have to serve these consequences for your decision to engage in criminal behavior. And I think that's really important for our entire justice system, because it's only if people understand what they've done, why it's wrong, and what will happen to them if they do it again, that they can really start to rehabilitate. So there is a direct line from my defender service to what I do on the bench, and I think it's beneficial.
Yeah, it is beneficial, and it really is a nice, nuanced approach. This is an observation that I think that is genuine. I mean, I've seen this firsthand. I've seen judges that act this way, and I've seen judges that don't act this way. I've seen judges that do the opposite of what she just said, that talk down to clients, that hurry them along. I've been on judicial advisory appointments boards. I've had conversations with judges about their demeanor and about how the way they treat people is not useful for a society. You know, if the goal of our justice system is to stop criminality from happening, right? If that's the goal. If our goal is to just punish people and like feel better about ourselves, then fine. Yeah, you can be mean to them and you can treat them like bags of dirt and like garbage, and you can just throw them in the gutter if you'd like, because who cares? Right? The goal for those people is just punishment and retribution. And you can get that by whipping somebody in the back and feel better about yourself. That's one way that justice has worked historically. It is a method of justice. It's not one that I subscribe to or think that is appropriate for America, but it is one way to do it. The other way that I think is better for a more mature, evolved society is to, help people that are helpable, help people that can maybe change and rehabilitate. And one of the ways to do that is by treating people as human beings, not like names and case numbers as they get just rifled through the system. And so this woman, folks, was a public defender. And what do defense attorneys do? They push back against big government overreach. They push back against anybody, law enforcement officials or anybody who is going to be trying to curtail your rights, step over your right against being protected in your home, violate your rights to against self-incrimination, right? Those types of things. That's what defense attorneys do. They push back against all those things. And so she's describing that with a humanitarian approach, and I really appreciate that. Now, she may, have opinions on a lot of the other issues that I completely disagree with, but on that issue, as a defense attorney, I wanted to call her out on that. It's a genuine statement. It's a nuanced approach. And I mean, that's only something that you can really, I think, learn from having been in the courts and sentencing people. She takes it very seriously, as she should. And so I want to give her a fair shake. Let's see what she has to say, as well as all the other nominees out there, including this woman. This is Deputy Assistant U.S. Attorney General Leandra Kruger. She was the California Supreme Court. So she's a California Supreme Court judge over there. Biden has already narrowed the field. One potential nominee is this woman, Kruger. She's 45 years old, so she's much younger. California Supreme Court, graduate of Harvard and Yale, so she fits those criteria. And she served as a law clerk on a high court, arguing a dozen cases. But Kruger, whose mother is Jamaican, also been described as moderate, which could be a tough sell from some liberal Democratic senators. So a California Supreme Court judge might be a little bit too moderate for everybody. And we'll see how that goes. And then we have a couple others. This is Judge J. Michelle Childs, nominated by Barack Obama U.S. District Court, Capitol Hill back in 2010. Let's see. She's a district court judge for Southern California, nominated, not yet. Okay, so she's been actually confirmed. She's been nominated over to the D.C. Circuit Court as well. So she's sort of on the same path that Judge Brown is on. And so we also have sort of a summation here before we wrap it up and take a look at some of these questions. We've got possible high court picks. We've got, looks like 6 women here. So we can just get rid of University of Florida. No, it's not Harvard or Yale, so that doesn't count. Princeton. Oh, wait. She went to Yale Law School down here, so that counts. Vassar College, New York School of Law. No good. South Carolina. No good. Stanford University plus a Yale Law School. Yeah, that can count. Here we've got Yale Law School and Harvard Law School. So I think we're narrowing the list down. Now, I'd like to see somebody else, from another school on there, of course, because, don't we want a little bit of Ivy League diversity also? I would think, but I don't know. All right, my friends. Well, let's take a look and see what is happening for my friends over on YouTube and over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I've had a couple questions come in. Thunder7 is here, says, Rob, at least they gave Breyer the option to retire gracefully in order to put one of their lunatic left-wing activists. Good thing he didn't end up dead with a pillow over his face. That is from Thunder7. We have another one from Vienticus, says, I figure I'll just give you the glory hole analogy again. Wait a minute. So hold on a second. So let me see if I can actually switch the camera over to some of these things. We're going to the messages format here. Okay, so this is good. All right, so we're going to try something different on the show today. Instead of using the form, let's see how I want to do this. All right. Thunder7 is here. Says, I smell the distinct flavor of desperation and panic as more and more cases of election fraud reach the Supreme Court. And Roe versus Wade is on the verge of being overturned. Remember, they have not even looked at any evidence, just sent back due to no standing. Breyer resigned with a gun to his head. All right. So here is... Vienticus is helping me out over, I think, on locals. We had a super chat come in over from YouTube from Monster1, says, Rob, I'm starting a petition to have the Republicans block any nomination until Trump comes back. Then Trump will nominate the best candidate, Rob Govea, for the Supreme Court. I don't think I'm a good candidate for it because I know too many COVID statistics. And it's not, I don't think that's a qualification anymore. Vienticus says, no, so this isn't working all that well because my chat's kind of screwed up. All right. And so we're about at the hour, folks. So here's what I'm going to be working on. Let me give you an update on what's happening with the show. So the form is not something that I'm going to probably be using in the foreseeable future because we have a little bit of growing pain situation with the form. And I got to make sure that what I am reading on the show is from the people who actually submit stuff on the form. And so what we're going to be trying to do is sort of revisit how I can integrate some of the live stuff from locals back into the show, but with a little bit more authentication. So where I can see that it's coming from the people that it's actually coming from. And so because the form doesn't allow me to authenticate anybody, I don't want to share stuff that is not coming from the person that they claim it's coming from. So what I'm going to very likely be doing is creating a separate persistent chat type of, a Discord or a Telegram or something like that so that we can continue to interface. But for the foreseeable future, I haven't figured out a solution on the forum with a little bit more, authentication stuff. So that's the problem. I know it's super frustrating, but I think this is just kind of the growing pains problem. And so if you have any suggestions, if you have any thoughts, if you have any workarounds, I am open to them. There are a couple different ideas. One would be a persistent chat, like a Telegram, that we have some moderators that I know who is who, and I can say, oh, this is Sergeant Bob. Oh, this is Vienticus. Oh, this is everybody. Whereas currently I can't do that using the form. So maybe a persistent chat. The other way to do it would be just a thread on locals where people can just the problem is rather than having a live chat, we would either have two threads, one with a comments, and I could read from the comments. There are messages that are sort of coming in on locals from the messages, and it's just not really working that well for some reason. So we'll revisit all of this, but that's why the show is just a little bit different. Talbert's mom says, have them submit 2 forms of ID, which is a good idea. Yeah, Ray Epps was here. Yeah, Ray Epps is trying to take over the show. FBI is trying to infiltrate it. The whole thing is just, It's growing pains. But I posted a little bit more information over on watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Shifty Shift is saying, doesn't Rob know when people say that there's Ray Epps, Pelosi, and Nadler that it's a joke? Yeah, I do. And that's part of the fun, right? That's kind of why I wanted the anonymity, is because it's fun. It's fun when Jerry Nadler in his 45-pound diaper shows up, and it drives me nuts. It's hilarious, but it's one of the nice features of having the anonymity. The problem is if somebody says that they're, for example, Shifty Shift and they're not Shifty Shift, or somebody says that they're Monster One, or somebody says that they're Tweak and they're not actually Tweak, and I'm reading a message that maybe is supposed to be from Tweak, but it's not actually Tweak. That's where we get into the problem. And Matt's mom says, now I will never hear my name, but you just did, Matt's mom. Engineer 12 Volt is also in the house. Says, man, I will miss the anonymity. So I have to figure out what to do about it, because I really like the functionality of the kind of the jokiness, but I can't have people, I can't be reading things under the identity of somebody else if it's not actually that person. So I just got to be extra careful about that. But we'll continue to develop the solutions, and we'll continue to have fun. I wrote on Locals that, if you're not catching flack, you're not over the mark, right? You're not over the target. And so if people are trying to, to try to kind of squirrel into the show and goof around a little bit, that's just part of the territory, I guess. And so we'll continue to walk through it. Vienti Kiss on Locals says, I want to be a recess pick for SCOTUS just for fun. How do you think I'd do? I mean, probably as good as anybody on the left up there. Monster One says, just make a new account with a dirty diaper name. YouTube overlords. Tremendous says, that's the issue. Someone said that they were someone they weren't. Didn't happen to me, but the example would be they put tremendous on the form and they didn't write the question. Yeah. Bend Over says he isn't really bend over. Yeah, I know. I know. Oh, all right, everybody. So I want to welcome a couple new people to the tremendous community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Before we wrap it up, we've got Wonder Girl 30 who joined. We've got C. Jones. We've got John. We've got One Tough Chick, Frank MC 42, I on Energy. We've got Wild Child, Alaskan for Trump, AZ Grayman, Mr. Shields, Nora MC, LG00, Angry Bear, Stassi Steph, Ratbag 13, Ocean Lover, Free Mind, Humphrey's Dad. We've got Shiraz 31, Faraday, The Brink, Lena, Piper _ and Todd Hupp. And that, my friends, is it for us for the day. And I want to thank you for being a part of the show. We are going to be back here to do it all again tomorrow, and we'll figure out the question functionality, come up with some sort of solution, figure out that in time. And I hope that you join us for it, because we're going to be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is Mountain, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. on the East Coast, and for that one Florida man. Everybody else have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.